Angela Merkanyan, Small Business Program Manager with the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, or LAEDC. Today's event celebrates the one-year anniversary of Together for LA and the power of working collaboratively to provide a no-wrong-door solution for small business technical assistance to the women and diverse-owned small businesses in LA County disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Together for LA is a strategic partnership who joined forces to advance a more equitable, sustainable, and resilient economic recovery for small businesses. Together for LA partners include the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce, Local Initiative Support Corporation Los Angeles, or LISC-LA, the Dr. Lucy Jones Center for Science and Society, the Los Angeles County, the City of Los Angeles, and the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation. During the pandemic, when many of our small businesses were in need of assistance and our partners were struggling to have enough resources to meet the needs of our small businesses, Wells Fargo brought us all together and funded targeted services to women and BIPOC-owned small businesses. On behalf of Together for LA, we would like to thank Wells Fargo for providing us with the support to deliver direct assistance to hundreds of small businesses that were most in need. So thank you so much. This symposium will also highlight the launch of Together for LA's one-year report and celebrate the efforts to drive resources to small businesses that are women and BIPOC-owned. We will also have 2 panels filled with thought leaders like yourself who have a role in shaping the post-pandemic recovery and resiliency support for small businesses throughout LA County. We'll also have a Q&A portion during each panel and hope to hear from everyone as we discuss the future of small business resiliency in LA County. Hopefully you all had a moment to take a look at the agenda and the reports that were given to you at registration. But before I kick us off with our guest speaker, just a couple reminders. Bathrooms are through the lounge to the right, and we have been asked by the building to stay within event premises, which is in this room and the lounge right over. To kick us off, please welcome Dr. Lucy Jones, seismologist and founder of the Dr. Lucy Jones Center for Science and Society, who will be followed by Stephen Jordan, CEO from Institute for Sustainable Development, who will present the highlights from the Together for LA report. Thank you once again.
Thank you all. It's great to be back in person. Or I realize one of the problems I didn't have before. You wear the mask, you wear the makeup comes off on the mask, Don't have to worry about that with Zoom, but it's still worth it being here in person, right? And of course, I'm a seismologist. What's a seismologist doing in here with a bunch of business leaders? I spent my life studying natural disasters. It began with earthquakes, it went on to other ones. Studied floods and tsunamis and wildfires. And one of the things when we really look at what disasters do to society, we start discovering how much they are the same. The physics of an earthquake and a wildfire are pretty different, but the impact on a business community ends up being very much the same. And one of the similarities that's striking is that when you look at the disaster, how much has been destroyed by the earthquake, bringing down the buildings, destroying the infrastructure, and on business disruption equals the total of all the other costs. And we saw this over and over and over again. We modeled the San Andreas earthquake and came up with $100 billion in direct losses and $100 billion in business disruption. We saw it when we looked at floods. We saw it when we look at tsunamis. And I think now when we look at the pandemic, because let's not fool ourselves, it's a disaster in the same sort of sense of a disruption to society. We don't have the physical losses to infrastructure, but we have the business disruption and of course the fatalities. There will never be an earthquake that will kill as many Angelinos as died in the pandemic. Right? It's hard to think of it that way because we respond emotionally to the time over which the disaster happens. The more sudden it is, the more we fear it. So the earthquake that's over in a minute or two, that's the definition of natural disaster for most of us. But it's a minute or two, The floods might be a day or two. The wildfires are starting to be weeks. The pandemic is in years, and climate change is in centuries. And because of the longer time, we have a different emotional response. But we really are facing the same level of disruption to our society. And the disruption to business is also disruption to people's lives. So when we study how do we best not fail in a disaster, we come back to how do we get the business community back up and running as fast as we can. And I think we've all seen this here. Our response to the pandemic is about how we're coming back out and bringing ourselves back together. The one thing I will say, though, is disasters can also be opportunities. When you have the really catastrophic disasters, they disrupt so much in society, you have the chance for something new. Right? We've changed a lot about how we interact in the last 2 years. Masks are normal, Zoom is normal, but there's a lot of ways in which we can be way more efficient because we've allowed those changes to come in, and it also can change society at a deeper level. I've studied the northern Japan that went through the horrible earthquake in 2011 has seen a really significant change to the role of women in that community. Because when so many lives were disrupted, they had opportunities that they could step into. Let's turn the pandemic into a place where we have opportunities that we can step into, because the way you recover from a disaster is through each other, is through community. The single best predictor of a community recovering from a natural disaster is the degree of social capital. How much are we already connected to each other? And thanks to Wells Fargo, this is a place where we are all now connecting in a way that we didn't before. And that's an opportunity that will be there for us in the next big disaster, because they're coming. And the community we have, and the strength, our resilience of our community and of our business community to recover is going to be the definition of what Los Angeles is like after the next earthquake or wildfire or flood. We unfortunately do multi-hazards really well here. And it's why I, as a fourth generation Southern Californian that cares about this community, and as a disaster scientist, have spent the last 2 years working with the business community, because I know that's where our future lies. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's always great to follow Dr. Jones. So we did it. 1 year of working together collaboratively with Together for LA. And I have to say that in addition to Dr. Jones and the Dr. Lucy Jones Center and John Guerry, and our partners at the City of Los Angeles, the County of Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Chamber, LAEDC, LISC LA, and Wells Fargo. It's been a joy, and in a way, this has been a snowball effect. Over the first 6 months, we were really trying to figure out how to work with each other, and over time, I think we've built a huge reservoir of trust, and we've been able to start to include many other organizations in LA, and actually, I'm hoping that we are able to tap into a national ecosystem that should be very supportive of what we're doing here. I have been working on public-private partnerships and the role of the private sector in disaster management and critical infrastructure protection for 25 years. I was doing critical infrastructure before it was cool in 1999. And I have been working on disasters here in California since the Cedar Fire in the early 2000s. I am so encouraged by this initiative. But allow me to cut to the chase. LA, Los Angeles needs an ongoing economic resilience capability. The stakes are too high. Now, I have seen too many extreme events turn into major disasters because pre-existing community conditions were not addressed. Small businesses were already too close to the bone and they weren't supported. And recovery efforts, had a tendency not to be coordinated, and they were not as effective as they could be because of that. What we're developing here with this model is a way to start to connect the dots. And the it really comes out of the tragedy of COVID-19. In 2020, 60% at least of the small businesses in Los Angeles closed their doors temporarily. An estimated 15,000 never reopened. If just 10% of those businesses had been saved, that would have saved somewhere between $300 million and $1.5 billion in lost GDP. As LAEDC, in partnership with WEDAX, has researched, 437,000 people lost their jobs in 2020. 20,000 people became homeless, and different neighborhoods and communities across LA still struggle today with the fallout of food deserts, service deserts, and empty storefronts. Severe impacts hit women and minority-owned businesses particularly hard. During 2020, many said they were unaware of available programs or how to access them. They felt excluded, or that different programs did not apply to them, or when they were in the system, that it was overly complicated and not worth the effort. Before COVID had happened, if we had had an ongoing economic resilience program, we could have saved a lot in terms of the social and economic damages that happened. So I'm going to report out 3 things today. 1, how and why Together for LA developed. 2, what we accomplished. And 3, the implications for the future. So how did the Together for LA collaborative develop? Well, first of all, I think it was based on the goodwill of a lot of the organizations that were all trying to do something individually, but recognizing that no single organization could do everything. And I think that, I know this is going to embarrass him, but Greg Shurkin with Wells Fargo was working with each of us, and he suggested that we start to come together and compare notes. And I think that this really gelled by August of 2020. You know, as I mentioned, before COVID, in many places that I've seen, economic disaster response has tended to be fragmented, siloed, uncoordinated, and reactive. I don't know if you all have ever seen kind of little kids playing soccer, where the soccer ball goes and then everybody goes to the soccer ball. You know, well, this is the kind of thing that has tended, in my experience, to happen with disasters, is that there becomes like one focal point and everybody jumps to that. And then you have all of the people in all the other neighborhoods and all the other communities who are like, what are we? What's going on here? And I think that part of what was going on is that we realized that instead of clumping around 1 or 2 particular issues, we needed to go zone. We needed to be able to cover more neighborhoods. We need to be able to get out more into the community. We needed to be able to compare notes about who had what service and how it could help most effectively. And businesses had a lot of needs in this time. They were telling us that they needed access to capital. They needed to develop an online presence. They were dealing with huge supply chain challenges because their vendors were shut down. There was a real significant challenge with customer retention, partly because COVID changed everything in terms of people's patterns. And so if you had a storefront, you know, that had a lot of foot traffic before, that foot traffic wasn't existing. So we had to develop tools to help people get through, to be sustainable, to find customers, to find vendors, to find financing to tide them over. And there were a vast number of other support services that I think some of the small businesses that are here today can tell you directly what they needed. You know, people like Jonathan Kennard, who sponsored our coffee here today, he had to sleep in his store for how many months? 2? 3? 3 months in order to keep it. Alas Media was doing a lot of work with film studios and doing a lot of high-end work. They were doing whatever it took. They were filming birthday parties and weddings and just had to change everything that they were doing. And you know, I'm sure that there are a ton of other stories here as well. So what we did is we started to come together in August. We recognized that some things were clearly falling through the cracks. We needed to develop a framework for how we could extend more coverage. We wanted to make it open and invitational to as many organizations as possible. And we also realized that we didn't need to reinvent the wheel, that there were a ton of programs out there. You know, in this area, we have 265 economic development organizations, 118 urban development organizations, 114 chambers of commerce, 91 venture capital firms, 88 cities and their departments, 73 co-working spaces, 42 business improvement districts, 44 CDFIs, 33 accelerators, 19 job centers, 15 convention centers, and 8 small business development centers. It wasn't so much that the things weren't there. All of the partners had tremendous ongoing programs that predated what we were doing. But what we realized is that we needed to do technical assistance to help bring people into what those opportunities could be. So we developed among the different members, and different people did, different organizations did different things. We developed a broad suite of technical assistance services. We clearly started figuring out how to pass the ball to each other. And we did this through regular communication. We also did multiple forms of outreach. And as projects really emerged, one of the things that was cool was to see subsets of the groups come together on specific projects. So out of Together for LA, Together for South LA emerged, and really made a concentrated effort on some of the neighborhoods that we had identified that were really not, that were needed to get more attention and more service. So as a result of this, it's hard because a lot of our data is just from the halfway point that we have. We haven't pulled together all of the data up until today. But I feel comfortable in saying that we've had easily more than 500,000 messages go out to the business community. We've had, we've probably, I would say, around 40,000 small businesses have gone through some form of outreach or engagement with us. And we have conducted dozens of training programs and workshops and webinars, including the One LA Inclusive Procurement Program, which the Los Angeles Chamber stepped up on. No cost, one-on-one technical assistance through LAEDC. And LAEDC, you know, created a wide swath of supporting programs, webinars, and training. We had the Keep Our Shops on the Block Digital Accelerator Program by LISC LA and the IXL Center. We had insightful workshops on surviving the big one and key takeaway from the pandemic by the Dr. Lucy Jones Center. Of course, she always drops the mic when she does these things. We had, on our end, we had student-run street-level outreach. We held workshops with community support organizations and business support organizations. And we helped to create a robust directory of all of the support systems that we had so that the people could access not just local, but state and national support programs. And then, of course, you had the City of Los Angeles, which supported multiple grant programs. And last but certainly not least, procurement technical assistance, certifications, and grant programs for micro and small businesses run by the Los Angeles County of the Office of Small Business. And I haven't even mentioned our friends at the LA County Office of Emergency Management and all of the work that they have been doing on hazard mitigation and recovery. So, it's a lot. You know, we talked about how we came together, the important need. We talked about the steps that we took. We talked about the beneficiaries of this. And we've talked about the need going forward. But I really want to hammer this home. We need an ongoing economic resilience program. As Dr. Jones cited, we have San Andreas to look forward to. We have wildfires. We have potentially cybersecurity attacks. We have a whole range of things. I'll tell you a little story. In December of 2019, we did a survey of the biggest threats that small businesses were expecting in Canada. And the pandemic, and this is December of 2019, the pandemic did not make the top 10. So we may be gearing up, for thinking, oh, we're going to have to deal with another pandemic, and we probably will. But we also have to think about all of the other hazards that we have, and we need to create a support system for our small businesses because the economic and social costs are too high. We need to move from reactive to proactive, from siloed to connected, from uncoordinated to synced up. And we need to build trust. This isn't just about the founding members of the collaborative or the 500 organizations that have ended up being looped into this. This is about making sure that all of the folks that are willing and interested in helping out are able to have flow, that we're able to have trusted mechanisms so we can pass the ball to each other. And the payoff is simple. $1 invested in resilience supposedly saves $7 in disaster costs. But we know it could be so much more. There are many critical questions that need to be worked out still, and I know that this conference is really starting to engage and wrestle with what the next step should be. I'm hopeful it will push us forward in this direction. As COVID has shown, the costs are just too high if we don't. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. So we're really excited to have the symposium today. As you look around the room, it's not your typical, you have like 50, 100 people in the audience. We invited folks with different perspectives. Your expertise and your thoughts are critical as we think about the future of small business resiliency. You all bring lived experience, different thoughts. Perhaps you're providing technical assistance, perhaps you're funding technical assistance, perhaps you're like the city and county overseeing a lot of centers providing technical assistance. And so today's two panels will feel like a fireside chat. It'll feel like rapid fire conversation. And what we want to do is hear the diverse thoughts. So each panel will start off with a 2-minute opening for each panelist, answering their question for that panel. And then we're going to dive into conversation. But we also then will open it up to Q&A with the audience. So we do want you to write down your questions, and when we get to that time, we do want to hear from you. But what we want to think about is what's the next step? We all pivoted because the pandemic forced our hands, in short. But now we're at a point where we need to pause and rethink. We need to re-strategize. What are the new issues? What are the ongoing issues? And how do we get smarter? How do we get more targeted? What are the new resources that maybe we ignored, but now are more prevalent and we need to double down? And how do we bring more and more partners into the fold so there's no wrong door for small businesses, so that their needs are being met in real time? Because the difference of being able to make payroll today is the difference for so many people in a community. And that's extremely important. So first, I wanted to thank you all for coming because you were invited to bring these thoughts. And so I'm going to thank you ahead of time for participating today. And if I can call up the first panel, we have Javon Sanders, CEO and founder of Toss It Up, Rudy Espinoza, Executive Director of Inclusive Action, Libby Williams, Executive VP of Vermont Slauson Economic Development Corporation, Carrie Doi, President and CEO of PACE LA, Ben Raju, District Director of SBA Los Angeles District Office. So as they come up, not seeing our good friend Libby, so hopefully she will join us shortly. But thank you for joining. I'm gonna pass the mic. We'll start with our good friend Siobhan over here. We have two questions that we asked the panel to consider as they prepared for today. So it's one, what do small businesses continue to need to be resilient? And two, how do we reimagine the provision of services for where we are now and into the future? And so each panelist will do a 2-minute opening statement. We want to hear their thoughts up front and then dive into the conversation. We encourage you to, we listed everyone's title and organization in the agenda for today and encourage you to look them up and connect with them on LinkedIn. But we're going to skip the traditional introductions and everyone's bio today. But I'm going to make an exception for our small business participant today and also give her that extra time to introduce her business.
Hi, everybody. Excuse me. My name is Javon Sanders, and I'm the CEO and founder of Toss It Up. Toss It Up is the first Black-owned salad company in Los Angeles, South LA, targeting our community to ensure that they have a healthier alternative instead of the fast food and the processed food. So to answer your questions, one thing that a small Black business owner need would be assistant. A virtual assistant would be great. This virtual assistant will help us with our back office. As a small business owner, we are usually a 1 to 2 man team, and we need help. We wear so many hats. We are doing the administrative, we're doing the inventory, we are the delivery drivers, we're the production team, we do it all. And some of us have our own families as well. So that assistant to assist us on cohorts, virtual Zoom meetings, taking notes, even sitting with us brainstorming, getting our ideas out on paper and see how we can basically take one idea and work out the steps to implement it. Doing this would definitely help us. I know personally, I participated in like 8 cohorts during the pandemic. Usually you go over your financials, you go over your standard operational procedures and what's next. However, once I'm off that Zoom call, I forget what's going on because now I have to turn into the production team. Now I have to be the employee or I have to send out invoices. Yes, these Zoom calls might be recorded. However, we don't go back to them. We have them, we know where to go. However, we don't have the time. We are attending to family members ourselves, which sometimes we forget about ourselves. And then we're focused on bringing up the numbers or what's our next event. Currently, it's a 2-man team with Toss It Up. We get help from family and friends. However, when it comes to setting up the pop-ups, getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, making salads all the way to 3 a.m., sometimes we only get 3 hours of sleep. So having that extra hand just to take notes will help. You know, get those ideas out because one thing, to get to the funding, we need the numbers up, but we hit a threshold. We hit a ceiling to where we cannot get past the amount we could do because we can make, I would say, 150 salads and split up to quote unquote 2 pop-ups. But then we have to come back and make more salads for the next 2 pop-ups and have on that smile and have that face, but inside you're tired. But you want to go further, but it's like how? You know, it's like you're just pulling more weight. And that's one way we can get up there. Another way, I would say, community training centers. A lot of us, we are small businesses, but the training we have are from previous jobs that we're using skills from different entities and making it work. Maybe if we had that one-on-one assistant, someone who has a business that can come out and train us on the standard operation procedures or how we could relate to our employees, our future employees, that will get us to the next level. Another thing is, developing personal skills. And some of us have technical skills, but some of us need to be retrained on the new technology. computer work, a lot I have noticed do not know how to work a Zoom call or send out an email or do the basics that we think we all should know, but they don't know. Another thing will be, I wrote them all down, as you can see. A lot of Black and minority businesses, especially women-led, we're being held back because we don't have that funding. And from a personal level, I started off getting funding through Uber and Lyft. I would work driving the bus 8 hours, but then get inside of my car and build up money to get coolers or different types of equipment. And it should be easier than that, and it should be accessible. I personally know for a fact that it's hard. It's hard out there for a business owner. We all don't have family and friends to depend on. We're bootstrapping to the fullest. Like, it's hard out here. And luckily, now it's not just woman-owned, it's a man and a woman toss it up to where it standards, but now, like stated, we're at a threshold and we need to hire. Funding will help us bring in more hires from the community and then train them to see, okay, we all can make it. Salads, who would ever thought that could be one product that the community needs, so that's how I.
Thank you. Ben, what about you?
Well, I think Toss It Up needs another round of applause for all that. And I'm gonna save about 1 minute and 59 seconds and go what she said. Because I think I couldn't have elaborated better myself. I think all of the topics that was hit on are exactly what we need, but the only thing I would add to that is the fact that this room is it. Right, these types of events and these types of things, and that's one of the things. Sitting in my seat, getting an opportunity to see all over the country the way things are done. LA's doing it. Together for LA is doing it. This is the model for being able to help entrepreneurs not only be successful but be resilient. And my friends over at the emergency management department, we've been doing this a long time together. That's not always been on the table. To help, access to capital, those types of things have always been part of the conversation, right? Technical assistance, as I'm sure Carrie will talk about here, has been on the topic. But resiliency, preparedness, it's always been kind of one of those things that have been, and we've, I think, learned over the last 2+ years that type of resiliency and that type of ecosystem building that needs to occur needs to be a full-time, real-time thing that's incorporated into our business on a daily basis. While we're working towards getting the technical assistance, while we're working towards that, as each of these partners, which are a lot of our partners are here at the table today, have those conversations, having this ecosystem around, and there's a great graphic inside of the magazine that covers Together for LA and the small business owner and all the different components that are out there. What I'll close with here is to say, you're not alone. And if nothing else, Together for LA provides that opportunity for you to get to know those resources that are out there, that are available to you, and bringing them closer to you to be able to leverage, to be able to be successful going forward. And I know we're going to answer some questions in a little bit, and we'll go into more detail there. But I couldn't have said it better myself, so I'm gonna save us some time.
Carrie.
I am totally humbled to be on this panel with these highly accomplished people, to be with all of you in the room, and you all are much smarter than I am, and so I'm going to just shoot from the hip because I'm an old man, and so I don't much care about how many feathers I ruffle nowadays. Let me begin by saying that I am incredibly disgusted about the Supreme Court's decision about overturning Roe v. Wade today. Let me also say that last Sunday has been a long time coming. for the celebration of Juneteenth. Also, on June 19th was the celebration, the 40th year anniversary actually, of the murdering of a Chinese guy by the name of Vincent Chin in Detroit. Killed by 2 laid-off auto workers that thought that he was Japanese and blamed him for them being laid off because of the success of the Japanese automakers. Murdered by getting his head bashed in with a baseball bat, and the murderers never spent 1 day in jail. Wednesday night, they talked about a guy standing in the middle of Koreatown, being blindsided, smashed in the head, fell to the ground, lost consciousness, didn't know what happened to him, had to go get hospitalized. It was all over, not only the local media, but also in the Korean media. And for weeks and months, they've been telling people, be careful. If you're going to come to Koreatown, make sure you don't wear nice clothes, don't wear any jewelry, don't show your phone, because it's dangerous. Koreans are afraid to go to Koreatown. And so in addition to the battling COVID, surviving, Asian businesses have to deal with racism. And it's not only Asian businesses, right? We could talk about the 18 small business programs that PACE runs to help small businesses survive and thrive. But the 800-pound gorilla in the room is racism. The solutions are not that simple. But let me suggest that until the conservative leadership in this country develops a campaign saying that racism is un-American, and they repeat it over and over again, these 10,000 incidents of violence against APIs in the last 2 years alone will continue. And so beyond all of these programs that we have to help small businesses grow, we need to address the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and that is racism. I'll be happy to talk about all the different techniques that we use, but that's my 2 minutes.
I'm disgusted too. Yesterday I was listening to a podcast with Adrienne Marie Brown. She's a strategist and a facilitator, and she studies nature and how we could learn from natural systems to impact our work. And one of the concepts that she really focuses on in her work is the idea of fractals. The idea that I don't have control over Congress, I don't have control over the Supreme Court, but I do have control in how I engage with Carrie and how I engage with all of you. And we can do something today that ends up filtering up to the big decisions that are impacting all of us. And so today, as I'm seeing with everything that's going on in our country, that's what I'm thinking about. That's what I'm thinking about here. I work at a CDFI that focuses on getting capital and support to entrepreneurs in our communities. And so I think that that's something that I want to offer, Carrie, just that we need drastic change, but it begins with us, and it begins with the small things as we walk out of here, of how we are interacting with each other and how we're standing up for things when we see them every single day, injustices here in this city. The couple of things that I want to offer to the question is one is that I'm just really moved by our entrepreneur here in residence who's here sharing her story, and the entrepreneurs that we work with are sharing similar stories. One thing that I remind myself is that entrepreneurs are workers, and they are running businesses and they're creating jobs, but they got to pay their own rent as well, and they have to feed their own families. And once they close shop, they're thinking about how to take care of their families. And yesterday, City Council was deliberating over tenant protections and whether or not we should remove them. That's relevant to economic development, small business development as well. And so one thing that I want to offer us as a discussion is entrepreneurs are workers, and what are we doing as a field to take care of all types of workers, including our small business owners? The second thing is, I'm also excited about this gathering and to see some friends I haven't seen Carrie in a few years. Carolyn reminded me that I hadn't met her in person, even though we've been on a ton of Zoom, and Kelly. But to see Carolyn and Kelly, for example, is pretty amazing to me. Because the second thing that I want to say is that we have to rethink how we work together as collaborators. Maria is here from the private sector. It's amazing. We have to not only fix market failures, we have to shape markets. And the market and the economy that we currently have is not working, so we must create a new one. And we have to do it together, and that is going to take more than, maybe Wells Fargo cutting a check to Inclusive Action to support our work. It's going to take more than that. It's going to take more than a government saying, hey, we can't do this work, let's outsource this to another entity. It's going to take something beyond that, and I think that we can create it together, and it's going to require all of us recognizing the fact that we are in a discussing place, as Carrie mentioned, and then moving to the next place and saying we need to fix this now, and how are we going to show up together to get to that place?
So let's talk about that. That's a perfect segue. Thank you. We heard some needs, right? We heard the suggestions. The three of you oversee a ton of services, right? What needs to change? Like when you think about, we heard our entrepreneurs, for example, right? They're working, we're asking them to attend Zoom meetings, access to training. How are we going to respond, right, to the Joans of the world who say, yes, I need that information, but I need more. I need it in real time. I can't take all those notes. I can't always step away from my business. What are you seeing? What are you doing? What are the pivots that, we have a collective room of people who are doing it as well, but what are you envisioning for small business resiliency as you continue to do the work? What are those pivots and changes?
Go ahead. Okay. A quick answer is that we see the same thing. Our entrepreneurs are busy. They're working 12-hour days. Like they don't have time to participate in a workshop, so we do one-on-one, and we meet them where they are. Sometimes we have to throw out the formal curriculum and say, what is it that you need today? You need to get the online shopping place up because you need to make some sales, because you need to pay your rent. How are we going to mobilize and get there today? And so that means being nimble. And I think that sometimes folks say, well, Rudy, that's really expensive. It's really expensive to pay for the staff to go and support our entrepreneurs, but that's what it takes. So the question is really, are we down or not? And if we're down, that means we gotta pay and we gotta invest. And we're investing certainly in a lot of other things that are harming us. Why not invest in something that's gonna help the folks that are creating jobs in our neighborhoods?
And Rudy hit it right on the button, but let me just reemphasize one-on-one housing, right? And it would be good to be able to do it virtually, by going to the business owner in their shop, being able to talk to them in language, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Filipino, Vietnamese, Lao. We're proud to say that we have 5 Spanish-speaking business counselors also, right? And actually holding their hands, right? And walking them through all of these things. There's a whole lot of people that don't understand business licenses and permits. Right? They don't understand the nuances and the necessity to filling out these forms. It's all paperwork to them, right? And so I think that's the key to everything is in language business TA.
And I think you'll see a theme that it's, meeting business owners where they are, right? It's making sure that John, when she has access to the information, whether it's 3 o'clock in the morning or if it's coming to her at one of her pop-ups or engaging and seeing the one-on-one technical assistance, all of which our wonderful partners like PACE does, meeting you where you are and making work with, helping work with the community stakeholders. You know, one of the ways that the SBA has really looked at doing that is through our Community Navigator pilot program, right? And I know we've got a couple of our CMPP folks here in the room as well, and pivoting toward meeting entrepreneurs where they are and in through organizations that they are engaged with or that can help engage with them. In language services, as Carrie said, is important. Our community of entrepreneurs is diverse. And whether they're facing disaster resiliency, whether they're facing economic challenges, whether they're changing access to capital, you know, filling out an application, if it's tough and you understand it and you can read it, imagine how hard it is if you don't know how to read it or you don't understand the language and you want to make sure that you're able to do it. You can be a completely viable business that's able to take on and leverage and be able to take on additional debt, but you're not able to fill out the application. So developing ways to be able to do that, but accessing it. And I think, John, you said it during your opening, is that, you know, being able to get to it. I think I would reverse that, and it needs to come to you. And I think that's what we're seeing and we're hearing. Our wonderful counselors that are out there, whether it's through our small business development centers, whether it's through our women's business centers, the city's programs, the county's programs, there are resources out there and available to be able to do that. It's making sure that we continue to help encourage those things to be able to get to where they need to go.
You know, in our conversations, you mentioned you heard about something through council member yourself, and you sent an email to him. You got information, an opportunity came for it, and it was hard, right, to find the information, and it does. I agree with them. It needs to come to you. How would you want it to come to you? Like, how would you imagine you're in a room full of people who control a lot of the decision making? How would you want services to come to you?
Well, currently, Toss It Up will be going to our first location soon, and I want someone to walk in, take me step by step with the process and procedures, watch us, show us where we could improve, what could be implemented, and just give us your insight. I mean, that would help extremely. Then show us what's the next step. Because right now, we're just winging it. We're taking one idea, seeing if it works. If it works, let's try this one now. Oh, let's bring them both together. Let's try it over this neighborhood or that neighborhood. Or let's reach out to this professional office, this corporation over there. And it's like, we're doing it, but to write everything out that we're doing, it's extremely hard. Because at the end of the day, we want to go home. We know the basics by looking at other businesses, but to be actually in that business, you're doing a lot of trial and error. You're figuring it out, just like with life. We're figuring it out. And like stated, we shoot for the stars, we hit the moon, but we have other pieces to put together, because this is like a puzzle that we don't know. We don't know what it looked like. And when some people ask certain questions, we're like, well, we'll just figure it out. We look back at different statistics and data and say, hey, well, these people did this, let's try this out. Well, Sweet Greens is one of the competitors or whatnot. We could look at them, but then how would we make it different? How can we make it Toss It Up? Because Toss It Up is very different from everybody. And we are unique, and we service a different community than the others. So we want to be able to make it our own, but also get the community involved. That's where we want to reach, is the community. How can we reach the community? Because we can make all the salads, other entities can make all their products, but if we don't have the community involved, we're just making our products. We're not going anywhere. We do need the city involved. We do need the higher entities that can support us, making the phone calls and sending out invitations, maybe even have your lunches at different places, reaching out to small businesses. That will really help. That will really help us, because we know we're doing it for the community. However, the community only has so much too. And to get our numbers up, to get things in line, we need larger corporations to help out.
Thank you. I'm gonna open it up to the group. Questions, thoughts? Yes.
Hi, Ron, congratulations on getting this far. It's a difficult process. And you are to be congratulated for everything you've done so far. Now, taking it from this point is a difficult step, right? I've been around for a very long time. I've got experience in the food business. I've been affiliated with the SBA through the Small Business Development Center Network and El Camino College of Economic Development. I would have to say that probably the most important thing is you being able to define your business for its distinctive difference relative to everyone else. Now, there are lots of people with good folks on staff, my friends at PACE, the Women Business Centers, RSVDCs, I can go on and on and on, but have you had access to any of these resources?
Oh, I'm signed up with Vermont Slauson, PCR. I also had a Zoom call with you because I'm like,
And you're still talking to me?
yeah. And joined several cohorts from LEAF with Cal State LA, USC Bridges.
So what didn't those opportunities do for you? What was missing?
What was missing, I believe, one key component that we were missing was our own facility. And that would be, we needed funding. So when we look at our numbers, not having a team will get us to a threshold. So we had to show various numbers to get to that certain point because we couldn't afford the rent. It was one thing after another. And it was like, people wanted to show the numbers, but then we had to do extra work. But then those numbers weren't high enough. Then we go into the rent. Okay, well, we can't afford rent because we don't have the numbers. So it was like playing tennis. So we received the information about capital, how to track your numbers, how to do your marketing, and so on. But when you're piecing up different things with only 2 people, it's only so much you could do. So we had to combine businesses with another entity to say, how can we make this work? We had to reach out to other small businesses that were also treading behind and trying to figure it out and say, wait a minute, this will solve our problem. Bringing other businesses together will probably solve another business problem. So yes, you're on a Zoom call with other businesses, business owners, but a lot of us do not collaborate together. We need collaboration. One strength could be somebody's weakness, and coming together, it will solve a lot of problems.
Well, I'll be happy to commit to come to your location and spend some time with you and try to help you out.
Well, thank you.
I'll also just add to that, there are a lot of best practices in other industries. So in workforce development, if someone came and said, I did this program, that program, this program, and that program, and I'm still here where I am, one of the methods is like a Together for LA initiative, which is why we all love that you're in this room together, is to bring the folks together and say, it's not working, what do we need to do? How do we better partner to make it work? And so a part of it too is, she's doing what she needs to do, right? And these are great programs. We know that they've been effective for other businesses, but there are still businesses where it's just not enough. And so we need to close those gaps. But I won't keep talking because I want to take questions and comments from the group.
Good afternoon, everyone. John Kennard. My question is in more relationship for micro enterprises, so businesses like myself where we have 5 or fewer employees. One of the things that I noticed during this time is that most of the businesses had compliance issues when there were funds available, but because, like she was saying, we didn't have time to do the paperwork or the proper necessary procedures. So my question is, when you find a business that is not in compliance, usually that conversation ends and there's no follow-up or avenue for those businesses to seek out to gain compliance and be able to qualify for a lot of these programs. So my question to those institutions is, what kind of opportunities are you creating or solutions are you creating for businesses who just aren't in compliance, who need all of this assistance and who are amazing candidates were it not for those small factors of paperwork issues that I've seen, not only as being a business owner, but as through my work in Vermont Slauson Economic Development and all the coaching and clients that I see as well. So that's my question.
So compliance, looking at it from multiple different perspectives, right? One is access to capital, as John was talking about, and getting compliance from your accounting perspective and getting that. And then compliance could be also from the permit side, right? And making sure that you have city compliance, county, and et cetera, business, licensing, environmental, et cetera, because there's a lot of these things that you have to do as a small business, right? John, you've seen all those, that plethora of stuff that you have to do. And I know it keeps circling back to that one-on-one technical assistance, that one person to be able to sit with you one-on-one, to be able to look at your business. What do you need? Where are those gaps that we were just talking about? And to be able to do that level of understanding. And there are experts in different fields, whether it's restaurants, whether it's if you're manufacturing, if you're packaging, or if you're a service-based industry, if you are doing, like you said, the micro enterprises that have a variety of different things that they're looking at, and they're just bootstrapping it, right? They're making in their money, whether it's driving Uber, whether it's doing a normal day job, and then trying to start their entrepreneurial dream on the side, to be able to one day turn it into something bigger than that. Those people that are able to sit with you, and that's the beauty of programs like our small business development centers, like our women's business centers, they will sit with you regardless of the size, whether it's a dream or whether it's something that needs to be expanded, or something that's just a concept in your in your mind, to be able to start walking you through what's necessary to make that dream a reality, or if it's working right now, how to continue to help it thrive. If you're not in compliance, let's say that you're supposed to be working out of a commercial kitchen to make your cupcakes, but you're doing them out of your kitchen at home. Well, there's some ways that you might be able to get that into compliance with new regulations that are out there. These guys and girls can help you get to that point and be able to say, okay, this is what you need for your business. If you get to the capital stage, same thing, but each one of those are steps and stages, and that person to sit down with you, as Joanne mentioned, to actually go in with you and say, okay, not this hypothetical Zoom meeting stuff, right, that we've been doing for the last 2 years and beyond, but it's that one-on-one, face-to-face, I'm in your business, hey, you know what, you need to move that table over here so we can fit another table over here, because you gotta line out the door and you can use another table. Or, hey, you know what, let's move these salads and these condiments over here, because you want to sell those, and as they're walking by, to get in there and be able to do those things and be able to walk through it. I know that we've got a lot of different folks that will be able to do that.
I think almost the majority of our clients are out of compliance in some way. And the reason why is because many of them are street food vendors. And currently it's almost impossible, if you're operating on the sidewalk, if you're selling food, to get a permit in the state of California, unless you have $100,000 lying around. And I think in those situations around compliance, what we're doing is working with partners to push back and advocate for systems and update them, because there's a lot of people out here trying to work, and the laws simply do not allow it. And props to the LA Chamber and others here in this room who have endorsed Senate Bill 972, which is being heard in the Assembly Health Committee this coming Tuesday. If anybody wants to go to Sacramento, you should come. That law is going to address some of those compliance issues that street food vendors are facing now, not being able to get their public health permits. So when those clients come to me and say, how do I comply? I'm real with them. These are the things that you have to do currently in the system, but this system's not designed for you. And so what are we gonna do together as a team to advocate and to push back? The other thing, the other example is, and maybe this happened to you and to other entrepreneurs here in this room, is during the pandemic, there was some small business grant programs. Some of those grant programs were designed in such a way that only businesses that had a profit on their tax return or didn't show a loss were able to be eligible for the grant. Now, most of us that get our tax prepared by somebody, that tax preparer is probably working to maybe show you at a break even or at a loss so you don't have to pay your taxes. That's what a lot of our clients tell us. Their tax preparer is working to try to show how hard it is to run a business, and they're telling that story. And unfortunately, a lot of our clients came back to us and like, damn, but my tax preparer helped me tell this story about my business, and now I'm not eligible for this money. And so that's a compliance issue, but it's also another example of how we do at times have to work with our city and county partners and our state partners to advocate and push back a little bit and again, shape the market. I felt that during the pandemic, the city and the county worked really, Kelly, right before your time, and Carolyn, your grant program was actually giving feedback the whole time. Miranda, I remember you were calling us like every other week, hey, what's the feedback now? How do we make adjustments to this program? And so we need to not forget that that's the type of programs that we need, programs that are nimble enough to, if our entrepreneurs are telling us that, hey, we're not even eligible, but we need the money.
Thank you. One last question. Go ahead.
Yes, this question is primarily for you three gentlemen here. I'm glad you guys discussed compliance because it kind of loosely ties to my question. Taking it back to restaurants, one of the struggles of a small business, a small restaurant business, is that getting access to a commercial kitchen to create your product legally and in compliance is very difficult because the bar to entry is so high in terms of a monthly cost. So when you're a business that is still building seed money or doesn't have some sort of loan or large capital investment, these things are just not feasible for you. And which effectively can kill, it often does kill your business, right? Until at least you're gonna do it until you get caught by the health department, which nobody wants. So my question is has there been, and if you guys can answer this, I understand, has there been any consideration for creating like a community cloud kitchen or ghost kitchen that is health department compliant that would allow businesses at a lower bar of entry to come and make their product out of that, especially these businesses of servicing the community and with their needs? Has there been any thought to that? If there hasn't, is there something that we could do to?
Bro, come to Sacramento on Tuesday. I visited their friend Mont Smith at Amped Kitchens right there in Lincoln Heights, and he does an amazing job. He's one of the first cloud kitchens that was certified by the health department. We went in there saying, hey Mont, I wanted to visit you, but also how do we make this more affordable for our folks? It's expensive to get in there. We tried to rent one stall there, and I was like, man, dude, it's too much, Those are the type of ideas we need to go to our health department and to our state leaders and say, hey, we need to make sure that the system allows us to do this. Currently, the rules for commissaries and commercial kitchens are so stringent, as you said, that it makes it expensive for that to pencil out to give us subsidized deals to rent. So I think that there's appetite, from my understanding, from Lisa Frias and Barbara Ferrer in the county health department to explore these things. And I think we just need to propose and come together, because you are the expert in this, and you going in saying, this is what I need to build my business is going to help them understand how they need to advocate for systems change.
Thank you. And we are just a few minutes behind, but I'm going to still take moderator privilege because Siobhan and I were talking, and they have a program for seniors in their community, and I think everyone needs to hear about it, so I'm going to ask you to share.
Well, during the pandemic, we participated in the senior meal program with City 8, Marquise Haley Dawson's district, and we were serving over 2,000 seniors. Now we currently are taking donations for our own senior meal program. We reached out to family, friends, Instagram, Facebook community, and asked everyone to donate a minimum of $5. So you now could go onto our website and donate $5, or if not, we could give you other methods. But it was, people wanted to give back. They also had seniors they wanted to get that services too. So Matthew and myself, we went out ourselves delivering salads during the pandemic, all the way from Carson, Cerritos, South LA, sometimes even Long Beach. We were all over the place. When we say we put work into Toss It Up, we really do. We are the ones who are getting the produce, who are doing the delivery, who's setting up the tents and tables in 2 locations on a Saturday to make sure the next person is there on time. And we are putting the work in. And That's what we need your help in. We need you guys to send out emails to other corporate entities and let them know about Toss It Up, because we do corporate events as well. We have the grab and goes to where you could choose different varieties of salads, and when you get these salads, they're gonna fill you up. They're not no side dishes. And they're packed with nutrition, so you're not getting the ice watered lettuce or whatnot. You're getting the real deal. So with us, and also I'm putting a lot of love into this. So with Toss It Up, it's not just tossing up the health issues. We want to show that Black and brown businesses can thrive. We also can come together like a salad, because we all have different elements to bring life to our community, and we can't do it without each other.
So, just really quickly, website address?
That is tossitupinc.com. You can find us on all social media, Toss It Up Salad, Instagram, Facebook. You could find me on LinkedIn, but better on Instagram.
Please give a round of applause for our panel.
Thank you. Well, that was a very stimulating panel. I think it leads right into our next panel. My name is John Boeri. I'm the Deputy Director of the Dr. Lucy Jones Center for Science and Society, and I have the honor of being able to moderate our next panel. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and we're going to take a similar format as we look into the institutional aspects of what it means to support our small businesses going forward in good times and those that are challenging. So first I'd like to invite Bill Allen, President and CEO of the LA Economic Development Corporation. Then Kelly Lobianco, who is the Executive Director of the Economic and Workforce Development Department of LA County. We have Maria Salinas, President and CEO of the LA Area Chamber of Commerce. We have Miranda Rodriguez, Deputy Director of LISC LA. And we have Carolyn Hull, who's the General Manager of the Workforce and Economic Development Department for the City of LA, which is city versus county. I'm glad they're both here today. And finally, Theodora Oyi, who is the President and CEO of Mindful Integration of Construction Services, small business here in LA. Come on up, Theodora. So this is the same panel. Give them a round of applause just because they look great and they took the time to be with us. Our topic is around resilience, right? And Lucy started us off with the idea that resilience is about connections between people, working together, strength, social capital. That's what it's about, and that's what sort of started to happen here in the last few years. But the question for each of you is our intro question, and I'm going to actually start with Maria, so get ready. How about that, right in the middle? Is how do we strengthen our region's institutionalized way to better support the needs of small businesses in good times and in bad? Okay.
Well, thank you, John, for tossing that question to me, and good afternoon, everyone. It really is a pleasure to be here, and could we just give them another round of applause for that question? It was amazing. It was really amazing. You know, I was thinking about that question, and we have our thoughts about the things that we do at the Chamber. You know, we collaborate, and certainly taking it to the next level about being intentional about collaboration. We do programs like One LA, and obviously we want to really strengthen that because we think that's doing a good job. And we look at policy and the advocacy work that is needed around small businesses. But I think we also need to step back a little bit to really be able to answer that question. I think we need to reimagine what each of our organizations are doing, or maybe at least within the Chamber. Because if we want to serve Toss It Up, then maybe we need to reimagine how we're doing LA, or how we're doing our advocacy work, or how we're doing any of the many programs that we have in our work that we do on a daily basis. We've been talking a lot about what are the lessons learned, right? Over the last year, we came together, thank you in large part to the work that was done with LAEDC, Wells Fargo, thank you for doing that. And now we're at a point where we can look back and reflect and say, what did we do right? What could we do better? Where do we need to rethink and reimagine? And I think it's a challenge to all of us, especially the chamber, I think, to really look deep inside and say, are we meeting them? Where's Rudy? Rudy said that, are we meeting them where they're at? And if we're not, how do we need to reimagine the work that we're doing today to make sure we have a stronger connection, that it's more intentional? Because now we're at a point that we need to think about the future. How do we build that safety net, the resiliency piece? And whether it was the pandemic 2 years ago, it could be something else. I'm sure Dr. Lucy Jones spoke about that. I'm sorry I missed your presentation. But I think that for all of us to really be intentional about collaboration, we need to also step back and say, what are those lessons learned? How do we need to operate differently to be able to do the work to touch the toss-ups and really make a difference there?
Awesome. We're going to go that way to Carolyn next.
Good. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My private sector colleagues often say to me, or on numerous occasions have said to me, that the scariest words they've ever heard is that I'm from government and I'm here to help you. But that was exactly what we needed to do during the pandemic. And I just want to talk about an example of how I think we did it pretty well. In early May of 2020, the City Council and the Mayor's Office said to our department, we need recommendations from you on low-cost or no-cost changes that we can make quickly to help the food and beverage industry. And what EWDD then did is we convened industry leaders, we got every city department, the county department, private sector, and we got people in the room who were able to make the decision. And in 8 weeks, we put together a series of recommendations that Mott Smith was on the team as well, put together a series of recommendations that really met the needs of the private sector, like eliminating certain elements of the plan check, streamlining certain services. We had 5 or 6 issues that we were intentional about. And we intentionally had people in the room who actually represented the industry. And literally, government has never moved that fast. And later, council, within, I would say, a month of that 8-week convening, and it was an intense convening in the sense that we met every other day, and we actually got the work done. So my takeaway from that is that as we move forward, we probably need to institutionalize that, because every industry has its own specific needs. And what I liked about what we did was we looked at an industry, we had a diverse group of people, we said you've got 8 weeks to pull this off, so don't dilly-dally. And we got a diverse group of people in the room. So my takeaway from that is that going forward, what I'd like to see our department do is actually pick up on that. Look at a series of industries that are important to our regional system and convene a group of individuals from all different sectors and come up with some suggestions that we can implement quickly.
Thanks, Carolyn. Let's go over to Miranda.
Hey everyone, Miranda. So I have 2 kind of thoughts on this question, and one is really speaking to the collaborative work that we've all done and engaged with during these past 2 years. But one of the big lessons learned for LISC is really about how important it is to share power and leadership with organizations that maybe do not have as much institutional or as big of balance sheets as somebody like a LISC does, and how important that is to make sure that our resources and our impact is actually hitting who we need to hit. And as we come out of a pandemic where we've had a very collaborative and empathetic spirit, part of our challenge, I think, as partners and leaders in this industry is to maintain that spirit of collaboration, to continue to invest capacity and resources into folks that aren't able to access it as easily as others, and to really hold each other accountable. We're all of us together are in so many collaboratives, we work on all these different initiatives, and part of, I feel like, what we have to do together is in a kind way, to be able to push each other to really try and live and breathe the impact that we're trying to make. That's on the kind of collaborative infrastructure. And as a CDFI and a financial intermediary, I would be remiss if I didn't touch on some of the points that folks made here about how, we all know that businesses don't have access to capital, and a big kind of emerging trend in the CDFI industry is how do we shape restorative justice center products that are meeting folks where they're at, and that are looking at risk and capital investment in a different way. And I think that, you know, some of the products that Lisk and our partners are piloting right now are the beginning of that, and we need bigger institutional partners like the city, the county, all the big banks to really think about that. Because VCs, as we know, invest billions of dollars in high-risk businesses that don't ever get it back. And we can't invest $100 grand into a business that, you know, has 10 years of being a street vendor or food truck that wants to move into a brick and mortar. So, you know, it's really about challenging ourselves, redefining that risk, and keeping that spirit of empathy, and we're all in this together as we kind of move into hopefully better times.
Great, thank you. Theodora, sort of similar question, but your perspective is a little different than some of the other panelists so far. So tell us what you think about what it means to institutionalize support for small businesses like yours and those that you're partnering with.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this forum. And more importantly, I think it's really, really exciting for our community, our region, to have this kind of forum, because our region has tremendous opportunities, incredible. First of all, the fact that we even have policies. We have policies that actually aim to include small businesses. That, for me, is transformative. And then number two, again, there's opportunities. All this work is available. The killer part, again, for me as a small business owner, is that the access, true access to the opportunity that you see, that you know exists, doesn't happen. There's a gap somewhere, you know, and that's one thing that I think, you know, this group can really, really think very, very hard about. And I think mostly it's enforcement. As Kelly, you know, Kerry mentioned earlier, very, very, eloquently and very simply, it's fundamentally racism. So let me go back a little bit more. My name is Theodora Oye, and my company is Mindful Integration of Construction Services. Let me start with that. And so what we do is we work with contractors to help eliminate the excuse that they can't find X. And that X, because we focus on the construction community, is local residents who want to work or can work on projects, or diverse businesses, whether it's a small business, a women-owned business, a veteran-owned business, and an LGBTQ business. They exist. LA County happens to be one of the few areas in this country where you can literally find a business that can do whatever you're looking for, at least one. So the excuse that they can't find, we can't find, does not literally exist. So with that, I would say that the owners of the projects have the added responsibility to really ensure that their aim is enforced. So the enforcement is lacking. The opportunities exist, the know-how to do the work exists, again, in LA County. The policies to do the work, practically every project in this town has local hire or diverse businesses, small businesses, however you want to, couch it. Those provisions exist. So to me, it's literally criminal when any project, whether it's, I don't know, a small $30 million county or city of LA, or any private project is being built and they do not have they don't have meaningful local hire, because we all know we've got the homeless problem, we've got local residents who want to work. There's no excuse for anyone, any project in our regions to not meet local hire goals. There's not one reason for any business, any project, not to meet small business goals. In fact, one of the, sorry to go on, one of the, LinkedIn we had the business, Small Business Week. We're celebrating Small Business Week. One of the posts one of the items I posted was that In LA County, there's approximately 250,000 small businesses. 250,000 small businesses in LA County alone. 55% of them are minority. 55% of the 250,000 claim that they're minority. And 38% out of those 250,000 businesses, small businesses, are women-owned. That is the highest formal women-owned business participation in the nation. So literally, there is not one reason why one project cannot, or any project in our region, not meet any of the goals. So,
thank you. As the next pass Bill, I'm going to end with you. Right, Bill and the we've heard about, so just as we get in here, we've heard about policies and enforcement. We've heard about holding each other and ourselves accountability, focus on industries and diverse stakeholders, and holding ourselves accountable to the question of, are we meeting our small businesses where they are? So Bill, and then to Kelly, where do you sit from your organization as you look at this issue?
Thanks, John. And first of all, thank you all. Again, one more voice thanking you for being here, because we don't come today with this roundtable with all the answers to present to you. We come with challenges to offer to you as our partners in this work to help us address the systemic weakness that exists here in our small business ecosystem. So as Theodora so eloquently said herself, with 250,000 small businesses who employ people, there's actually 1 million business entities in LA County, but they don't all employ people. 250,000 who have the capacity to employ people, create income, create wealth for those owners and those employees and those communities. We have tremendous capacity to move the needle on historic inequities that Carrie spoke of that, for the most part, relate to racism. Wealth inequities are profound in this region, despite the incredible abundance. We love to brag about California as the 5th largest economy among nations of the world, and LA County is a top 20 national economy. But despite all that abundance, the profound wealth inequities as well as income inequities that exist are deeply troubling to us. Small business is the answer to that. Historically, because of racist policies, individuals of color were denied opportunities to own houses, to access capital, to access a variety of opportunities that would have allowed them to create wealth, such that Black and Latinx household wealth is a tiny fraction of white household wealth. Well, home ownership, business ownership, asset ownership are critical to building wealth. So we should have an ethic in a state like California, a region like Los Angeles, where equity is so important to us, and eliminating these disparities is so important to us, to have the backs of our small businesses, particularly women and BIPOC-owned small businesses, in good times as well as bad. So you all should be very proud of the work you did, stepping up immediately when the pandemic hit, and businesses had to close to protect the public health. And the federal government response was not adequate in getting resources to businesses owned by women and people of color. You all stepped up in a variety of ways, and so did all of our organizations step up to make sure we could get resources to those who need them the most. But I think those of us who were in the game realized pretty quickly how inadequate our response was. Despite the hundreds of millions of dollars that we were able to place in capital with small businesses and the billions the state was able to place, it was a tiny fraction of what businesses want. The other thing I want to emphasize is that I'm glad we centered the voice of small business today, of Theodora and Javon. You're the reason we're here today. We're trying to design a system that meets your needs, so your input to this process is extremely important to us. Your courage is also awesome to me. Small business owners are incredibly courageous people. No one pays them to go to work. They put everything they have to bear at risk. They borrow from family, they borrow from friends, they borrow from neighbors, they borrow from any institution that will show them, because they have a dream of creating a service or a product that will benefit society in some way. And not only do they take that risk for economic gain, but look what Javon is doing, bringing healthy food to her communities when she mentioned one of a number of nationally known salad restaurants that are not in these communities, and nationally known grocery chains that are not in these communities. She's trying to deliver a health resource to her community. And so we should have the backs of our small businesses all the time. And just one other thing, we just had hundreds of investors from around the world in Los Angeles for the last couple of days, encouraging them to select LA as a place to invest and build businesses here. And we were very honest in the conversations that went on. California is not a cheap or easy place to do business. California is one of the most expensive and complicated places in the world to do business. Land is expensive here, labor is expensive here, energy is expensive here. And so our businesses start with sort of a 10-pound weight on their back. Imagine trying to race somebody down a track and you got an extra 20 pounds on your back. That's what we start the game with our small businesses. To the extent that we are willing to commit ourselves to building an ecosystem in California that says, we're going to put our small businesses on a level playing field, and particularly those who've borne the historic inequities that women and people of color have borne in this economy. And we're going to design a system that is designed for them. We're going to create capacity building investments to invest in the institutions they need to be there for them when they need them. We're going to encourage the connection of those institutions to create a system. We're going to encourage communication between those systems and their clients, the small businesses for which they exist. We're going to encourage collaboration, and we're going to encourage continuous improvement. Think about those 5 C's: capacity building, communicating, connecting, collaborating, and continuously improving to meet the needs of those businesses. That's the work we have before us that we learn together as partners in this Together for LA effort, is despite all of the pride that the city and county and state should take, and all of their nonprofit partners should take in meeting the needs of a tremendous number of our neighbors during this crisis, we didn't meet them all. And we can design a system that does. And one last thing, Steve had in his report a quote from President Clinton that said, he paraphrased it, I will as well, there's nothing wrong with LA that can't be fixed with what's right with LA. We got all the people and organizations we need. If we can organize them and resource them, connect them, and motivate and activate them to meet the needs of our incredibly courageous, brilliant, visionary entrepreneurs, we can do amazing things together.
Thanks for that. So, Kelly, take us home with your opening remark here about strengthening the institutional way we can support our small businesses. And it sort of was thrown to you just a couple months ago, right? As saying, it's your job. So tell us what the answer is.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, everyone. I'm Kelly Lobianco. I'm going to just take a quick second because the county's not new to Together for LA, but I am, and our new department is. So we are launching in just a few short days. Next Friday, the county's launching the LA County Department of Economic Opportunity. We're really, really excited about this. We are melding our workforce and economic development efforts throughout the county in one centralized agency to help us actually do all the things that we're talking about today, better support our workers, our small businesses, our major industries, and communities, every neighborhood and collectively in the county. And so I just want to share that, and I'm super excited to be here with you all today. So when I was thinking about this question, I was thinking about where we have common understanding. We're all here because we believe in small businesses. We know that they deliver jobs for us. They create jobs at huge rates for LA. They deliver amenities and experiences to our communities. They anchor our communities. They're really critical, and we know they're an economic engine. That's sort of our baseline here, and I really appreciate us all coming together, knowing that and wanting to do more. We also know that small businesses are at higher risk of failure. When there is a disruption, it impacts them more, and for many of the reasons that we already talked about. Access to capital, needing to formalize business operations, all of these things. But in this moment, sorry, one sec, take a step back. So that common understanding, we know we need to focus on resiliency, and we've often talked about that in the context of economic resiliency. Like, how do we support small businesses to mitigate a risk when there's a disruption and continue to obtain opportunity? But now we know we're in an environment where we maybe have an expanded understanding of what risk and resiliency might mean. So many people brought this up already. Not only have we experienced intense economic volatility, but we have an accelerating rate of income inequality. We have a continuing global pandemic and health crises, climate change crises, and really deep systemic racism and injustice that exists here today, and those are risks for everyone, including our small businesses. So I'm thinking about how do we come together to expand our collective understanding of what the risks are in this moment and what our definition of resiliency really means. Because we need to come together to understand what resiliency can mean when we're talking about people and social infrastructure and sustainable economic development or trade and supply chain or healthcare. There's so much that's just beyond making sure someone has access to capital or mentorship or the interventions that we've done in the past for that economic resiliency. How do we expand our thinking together? And I think it really takes this group and our small business partners to understand those risks and define what resiliency means. And as a county representative, I appreciate Carolyn's comment about government. We're here trying to mitigate disruption for small businesses, but where I do think there should be disruption is in how we operate at the county and in government. So I'm calling myself in, I'm calling our new department in, because I think some of the ways that we sort of build on what's been done already and that we strengthen and institutionalize our support for small businesses in the good and the bad and the ugly times is making sure we're setting those large public goals, making sure we're finding ways to not just aggregate the resources and the programs and services that we all offer, and there are many more right now as we come out of this pandemic, but start to think about how we come together to advocate for more resources and advocate for change policy, like Rudy said. How do we actually share data for that continuous improvement that Bill mentioned? How do we simplify access for small businesses? So not just, by the time you get to one of our organizations, make it easier to, define your eligibility and sign up for that program or resources, but, how do we get out into the community and do that one-on-one engagement, help you sign up for whatever it is you need and triage, so you're not just getting the first service that you find out that you might be eligible for, but you get the best one and you get the aggregate number of programs and services and resources that you might need. That's really critical. And so I'll go ahead and stop there, but there's a lot that we can do, and I think I come here with my commitment because small businesses are the engine of our economy, and they're going to continue to be, and we're facing a world that is very different, our future of work that is very different now, and I just appreciate the opportunity to really engage in that disruptive work with you.
Thank you. Thanks to each of the panelists for offering their perspectives, and I think there's some notes I'm going to share in a moment. But I ask each of you that are here listening to think about your role. Like we heard from some of you were panelists earlier, we heard about your role specifically, but everybody here has an interest in the future of this region and the future of small business. Otherwise you wouldn't have been invited, you wouldn't have accepted the invitation to be here. And each of us have that expertise. I'm looking at my friends from OEM, right? You guys know how to do that emergency management work really well. That's why you're at one of the most important agencies in the county, in the country. But we do it alone. And it happens that some of us know some of each other. But then you look at this list on the board, up on the screen, and you look at this group. And I think Rudy, we're going to just keep quoting Rudy today. Rudy said it earlier, like the fact that the county and the city are in the same conversation is really important to those of us who know how these systems work or in the past didn't work. And so you look at the list of logos here, some strange bedfellows, but also some that you expect to be together. And I think when you start to see that, and then you look around the rest of the room and the rest of the region and say, everybody has something really valuable to bring, how do we make sure it doesn't take the next disaster or the next crisis or the next calamity for us to come together and say, hey, I haven't talked to Maria in a while, maybe I should pick up the phone now and call her. So the question first to you, and not everybody, but anybody who'd like to answer, how do we make sure that as we normalize, because that's what we're humans, we normalize the situation that we've been in. We stop wearing masks because we think we're okay because we've survived this long, even though it probably still makes sense for us to wear masks indoors. Thanks, Leslie, for the reminder. What is it that we can do to institutionalize this? How do we keep this going in the good times so that when the bad comes, because it will, that we're not caught off guard? So Kelly, you're holding the mic. What do you think?
I take some planning, you know, I think that you talked about the soccer ball and chasing it. You know, we know that there is more and more risks, or at least we are acknowledging them publicly and highlighting them. And certainly some are accelerating. So I think that planning process is really critical. And I'm reflecting on a couple of the comments, but I think part of what institutionalizing really means is considering our, like listening to the community of small businesses about how they want to engage with us, internalizing that, and starting to shift what we're doing in these major systems, and making that a priority, right? Like we're launching a new department. Operational efficiency in a new department is critical to me, but it's not the first thing, right? Like ultimately, at the end of the day, being friendly to workers, being friendly to businesses is our mission and reason for being. So we need to maybe just flip that switch a little bit.
I want to applaud what the county is doing with this new Department of Economic Opportunity, because you took siloed efforts from your CEO office, from your Workforce Development, Aging and Community Services, from your Business Community Development Agency, which one am I forgetting? Business and Consumer Services. All of these disparate services that existed in the county, which made it harder for people to know where to turn and what was the right door. And you're putting them all together under the one umbrella of this Department of Economic Opportunity and naming it the Department of Economic Opportunity. I think it's fantastic. And I would also say it was so refreshing to all of us in the nonprofit community who have been supporting small businesses for decades to see the city and the county at every Friday call that we were on to coordinate our efforts in full partnership with their private sector and nonprofit partners. And I would also add, and he asked us not to do this because he's too humble, but Greg Shirkin, again, was part of the connecting tissue. It requires human connectors in this work to say, gosh, I see good work being done at the county and at the city and at the chamber and at LISC and the Jones Center and the LAEDC and IC. Y'all should be talking to each other. And you set up regular Friday calls and everybody starts sharing information. You realize there's partners missing. We've got to bring more partners into this. There's information lacking. There's technology platforms lacking. One other thing I just want to bring up is one thing we all defaulted to, I think, to try and get the word out to as many people as possible. And you saw a stat up there that said we sent over 1 million emails to small businesses in LA County. Not everybody has internet access. Thousands and thousands of our smallest businesses and micro enterprises have no internet access. In some cases, they don't have the infrastructure available to their business district to be able to connect to. In some cases, they don't have the affordability or the digital literacy. We ended up sending out postcards in multiple languages to people, giving them a phone number they could call, and they were so grateful for that. They said, I've been sort of hearing that there were problems, but I didn't know where to turn. Thank you for the joy. So as we design these systems, we have to design them for the needs of our actual small business community.
And I think this speaks to what Carolyn mentioned earlier, where it was getting leaders from industry to come in and inform the policy that was taking shape. But did someone else over here? I'll pass it down.
Go ahead, sorry. I was going to say, as a small business in the group, first of all, it's very exciting I echo your comment that the county and the city were not competing. And because, as a small business owner, you don't know, you don't have the time to understand or care why they're competing, So thank you for not competing, and thank you for all the other, agencies, the nonprofits and the for-profits that champion small businesses. I think to answer your question, more collaboration among these partners so that ultimately our region, because I think our region needs to be the big focus, not our, each individual agency and their whatever they want to do. That's, again, as you just said, small businesses that don't speak English, and Carrie mentioned it, they need the service, they don't know what's available. So please, yeah.
I just want to add to that. One of the big things that came out of the pandemic is the LA COVID Regional Fund, where the county and the city and philanthropy and corporate institutions partnered. But the biggest thing that came out of that is that we had one portal So no matter whether you were in 88 cities or in the city of and the other 87 cities or the city of Los Angeles or an unincorporated area, to the small business, it didn't matter. And that was, it seemed like a small thing, but it was huge. And I think those types of efforts going forward are really important to make sure that we make it easier for the small businesses and not easier for us.
Thank you for mentioning the LA Regional COVID Fund, because that's something that we're very proud of, the work that the LA Chamber did with regard to that. And it's going to be a little bit of a different lens. You know, we do a lot of the public policy and the advocacy work. You know, when that PPP loan was identified, it was Andrew, it was Patricia at the Chamber that said, hey, wait a minute. This is going to leave out so many of our small businesses and our micro enterprises that don't have relationships with the banks, that don't know how to get this information. And we were working with the county, with your predecessors and the city, and some of those very early calls to say, how could we get funds designated outside of that PPP loan so that we can service those many small businesses that aren't going to qualify for what's the PPP today. So glad you brought that up, because I think that's a perfect example of showing the collaboration. Bill, you remember those many meetings that we were in. But it also challenged us at the Chamber to be able to advocate for something different. And if you recall, the economic relief packages, expanded the funding, and we know, Ben, the various access points that were created after that through CDFIs and credit unions and dollars that went to counties and cities. And you need an organization like Chambers, like the many that are here, to keep advocating with our elected officials and giving them the straight story of what's going on at the street with our small businesses, because that's how we were able to impact the economic relief that came after that.
So we've now moved to the lightning portion of our program as we come to the closing moments of our program. But we wanted to allow the opportunity for questions from the audience, especially those of you who represent some really important partner organizations who hadn't had a chance to be on the panel. What questions do you have for these folks about the way that we can go forward together in a more institutionalized structure that allows us to support small businesses, recognizing what I heard over and over, that it's not for the small businesses, but with them, right? That it's including them in the development of this work to make sure that we're meeting them where they are and making sure that the work we're doing is serving their needs and not just the goals that we're setting from these organizations. What questions do you have for the panel today?
Thanks everyone. My name is Calvin with the Annenberg Foundation, and the question I have is actually bringing us back to the topic of race and racism. One of the things that I feel like was an interesting shift that I saw from my perspective during the pandemic is, we could have programs that were targeted towards Black small businesses with a capital B and Latinx businesses. And I feel like, the murder of George Floyd in the summer of 2020 sort of shifted us out of our normal, somewhat dated minority term we use for a majority of people of color county in Los Angeles, sort of strange. But my question is, I think that beyond just having, materials in different languages for community, when we look at the businesses that are most impacted by permitting, compliance, lack of access to capital, we're going to see this women and people of color-led businesses. So how are your organizations, I'm worried that we're slipping with that intentionality and focus. There's less dollars going to some of the programs supporting Black and Latinx and women-led businesses. How are we getting rid of that blur to retain focus on very specific populations of small businesses that have these generational biases, have these systemic, because that's not personal racism about, how we're having things going on person to person. These are systemic, deeply entrenched things in the design. How are you able to focus those resources on communities of color and women in your own organizations going forward?
Great question, and a couple of things. We can't do it overnight, but also having a different terminology. It's building wealth in those communities, and the programs that we're currently doing, and it started with the COVID pandemic response, is that we were intentional about our equity lens. I didn't mention this before. We actually, in all the work that we did, we prioritized businesses and micro-entrepreneurs that were located in communities that had low employment to population, that were in Cal Environment census tracts that were overly polluted. We actually tried to be intentional, and even in our latest run of ARPA funds, we just got the numbers for our comeback checks. 75% of the businesses that received funding were in high and highest need census tracts. And I also want to say another collaboration. We worked with the county to make sure that we were defining our census tracts in highest and high needs collaboratively. So if you're in a census tract in the city and you're a high need, then it's not going to be out of whack with the county. So I don't have a magic bullet for that yet, but being intentional, like we were intentional about it. I think it starts with just being intentional about it.
And listen, really provocative and interesting and important question, and I think Carolyn gave a good answer, but we are coming up on the end of our time. I actually wanted to turn one question back. You heard it mentioned a couple times. This sort of started because Greg sort of was talking to each of us individually in many ways and said, why don't we get together? And Greg, I wanted to ask you before we leave, why did you do it? Like, what were you thinking? We can blame you, we can thank you.
No
what
pressure,
were you thinking
Greg.
when you got to this point in that moment in 2020 when we got together, and how does that relate to what happens next?
Thanks, John. And thank you, everybody, for coming today and for all the heroic work that you've done over the past, through the course of this pandemic. It's really been truly incredible to see what you and your teams have done for our communities and for your companies, and we can't thank you enough. Why do we do this? Well, I mean, when we realized the magnitude of the pandemic and the impact it was going to have on communities, the adverse economic impact it was going to have on communities, we knew we had to turn to our partners and encourage them to work together. I think, sitting being a funder, we are in a very unique situation in that we have lots of conversations. We're very aware of what's going on with a lot of our nonprofit partners, and there's so much great work happening that we just want to really encourage them to connect with each other. And I think it's really incumbent on the grant-making and philanthropic community to really advocate for more collaboration and coordination within our communities. And I give Calvin a lot of credit for the work that Annenberg has done with the Fund for South LA Founders, and we've got Thomas Wong here from Edison, and we've got Blanca Aguirre from Bank of America, and you all are doing amazing work. And I think that if we're really going to try to move this forward and do what Jovan said, work together, because we can't do this without each other. We really do need to be focusing on how we can really fortify this work and really try to access more resources and set up something that will ultimately address some of the racist and discriminatory structures that have been in place for far too long. So, again, we're just so grateful to all of you for being here today and for the work that you're doing, and we'd certainly love to see this work continue.
Thanks, Greg, for that and for all that you've done for us. I'm going to invite Andrea Nunn, who's the Senior Vice President at the LA Area Chamber, to give just final closing remarks. But before we do, I just want to encourage all of you, as you listen to this conversation and you hear what's being done by this group of people and others, consider how you can get involved, how you can join to build a stronger connection, to collaborate more effectively with partners that maybe you do sometimes but haven't institutionalized, that we can continue and expand and amplify this work, not because we want to get the credit or because it's great to work with these amazing people, which it is, but it's because of the small businesses that we can support and the ecosystem that we can support generally by doing this work with individual assistance as well. So think about your role in this ecosystem of Los Angeles, whether you're thinking about 2028 or you're thinking about what's happening next week, and how you can get involved with this. So please feel free to talk to any of our panelists today in the reception. But with that, please welcome Andrea Nunn from the LA Area Chamber.
Thank you, John. This conversation has been incredibly inspiring because it's a conversation about collaboration. It's a conversation about it takes a village. It's a conversation about what can we do to fill the gaps? What do we continue to need to do into the future to build economic resiliency for our small businesses? Thank you so much for all of you for joining us today. This is not the end of the conversation. We continue the discussion. We would like to continue the discussion with a reception, so food and beverage for all. And we want to also, again, thank all the panelists, thank Wells Fargo and the entire team. We also want to thank our small businesses that are here today, as well as, in particular, Theodora, Javon, as well as the coffee this morning was provided, this afternoon, was provided by Coffee del Mundo, and the reception catering is provided by Little Llama Peruvian Tacos. Thank you so much. Enjoy. Continue the conversation.